What is good, NBA fans? How are we this week? Post celebration for the Milwaukee Bucks. They are world champions, and we have moved on. So much to talk about today. If you're looking for draft coverage, I'm sorry, you're not going to find it here. There are plenty of people that study and know those prospects backwards and forwards, and I suggest you seek them out because my opinion is going to be based solely on the opinions of those that I read. I have no firsthand knowledge of any of these guys, so it feels false for me to go, oh, well, I like this guy or I like that guy. I haven't seen him play, and the best I'm going to do is watch a mixtape or a breakdown of their potential, where they should go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's I don't know. You can do that on your own and draw your own conclusions. I don't know that you need me to read through and parse out what these guys are saying because I, once again, would just be regurgitating someone else's opinion. And what's the fucking point of listening to me do that or anyone else do that to act as though they're an expert when they haven't watched these guys play and they're just basing their opinion upon everyone else's. So I'm not going to do that. There's tons of other stuff to talk about in the association. First and foremost, guys, ding dong, the witch is dead. The NBA Board of Governors have voted to get rid of a lot of the bullshit fouls that offensive players have been drawing over the past few seasons. And hopefully the refs take that to heart and they actually begin to legislate this shit out of the game. What is now going to be viewed at differently? Well, the Trae Young stop short after he goes around to pick and draws the defender onto his back or onto his hip and then basically pushes his butt out to draw contact and then do this little shove floater thing. That's now either not going to be called or it's going to be called an offensive foul. Fantastic, because that's what it is. It's foul baiting on the offensive player's, part. And the blame does not rest solely at Trae Young's feet, but he is the one that really started us off down this road. And other players then adopted the tactic. Some players that I thoroughly love watching, one of which is Steph Curry. He started doing it too. Not the specifically that one around the foul line where he's like leaning backwards into the guy. I saw him do that a couple times, but he wasn't hunting it out like Trae was. But there are others like that, which has become commonplace for an outside shooter when they pump fake and they get the defender in the air and then they like drop their shoulder and then jump forward into the individual. Numerous guys do that. And they are no longer going to, supposedly they are no longer going to call that a defensive foul because what it is an offensive foul. The defender is not fouling them, is out of the way, and you are jumping into the contact. That means you're initiating, which means you're at fault. So it's either going to be a no call or a foul call on the offensive player. Fantastic. Another one they're legislating out is the offhand hook, where James Harden is the first player that I can think of that does this. He'll be dribbling, and then whichever hand does not have the ball, he will wrap around his defender, and then he'll go up into a shooting motion, and then suddenly his shooting motion is encumbered, is hindered, and it looks like it's a foul on the defense, when in reality, he created all of that contact. If anything, it should be an offensive foul, and they're going to change the way they call that. I believe there's also going to be tweaks to the kick-out rule when guys extend their legs on a shot, and they're going to adjust the way they officiate that. And the Kevin Durant rip through, perhaps I've seen that listed within the parameters of what officials are going to change for this season. They've already kind of legislated that out. Perhaps they're just doing a slight tweak to that. But good news. Some of the things that have been driving me and numerous others crazy is now thanks to the board of governors and the rules committee and the owners for voting for it, is going to be legislated out of the game, or at least they're going to amend the way they do that because it is utter horseshit. And I hate watching it. Don't you? It's the worst when you can clearly tell, like the Trey Young stop short or the pump fake, and then I jump into you. I'm clearly just trying to draw contact, and this isn't a natural shooting motion, or hooking a guy with my offhand as I'm driving. Those three things, it's not, in the immortal words of Steve Nash, that's not basketball. It's not. It's foul baiting and trying to get to the free throw line. Now there is gamesmanship within that. Trying to get certain guys into trouble and whatnot. Yes, but when you're searching out the free throws instead of a basket, instead of trying to get the ball into the hoop, that's not basketball. That is finding a loophole within the rules and exploiting it. That's not fun. How is that in the spirit of the game? And I don't want to get into this, like baseball, the gentleman's rules of the unspoken nonsense. Don't flip your bat after a home run and everything, and don't slowly walk. It's like, the unspoken rules thing is, I don't know. I don't really care. It's not for this show to discuss. But when you're exploiting a loophole, I don't know. I'm glad that it's gone. Let's just say that. Or at least it is going to be slowly phased out. Let's see how much of a difference it's going to make this season. But fingers crossed, it's a huge difference. All right, moving on. I watched last night's Olympics game. U.S. versus Iran. It's the only game that I've seen so far. I've watched clips and highlights of several different games, but this is the first one that I sat down to watch. And it was interesting. I mean, it's up against the U.S. against Iran. Iran doesn't have any premier talent. Hadidi is arguably their best player. He's a 36-year-old big man with bad knees who was a bench player in the league and last played 8 years ago. Still look pretty good, though, for a 36-year-old dude. Not bad. He's got some nice moves. Fluid shot. Little post turnaround that was kind of silky. And they had another guy at the guard position that was pretty good, too. But it's nowhere near the talent. And if you're watching the game at certain points, it really felt like the team wasn't playing near 100%. Now, in the third quarter, they were up by so much that both teams seemed like they were dogging it a little bit. And it ends up being a blowout for the Americans regardless. But there were certain points where they're making passes that you kind of only see in the Olympics. If you watch a bunch of these, where it would get picked off in the NBA, but because they're so much bigger and more athletic than the average competitor in a game like, Iran, that they can get away with. Defensively, they were blocking shots left and right, and made, we were shooting really well, especially in the first half, like crazy, lights out well. I would like to see them try and get to the basket and to the lane a little bit more, very reliant on 3-point shooting. And that can bite you in the ass if you're not trying to force the pressure onto the defense and make them, keep them honest. Otherwise, if you're just going to sit outside and shoot threes the whole time, if you have an off night, you're going to go down. Just no ifs, ands, or buts. And when you go up against some of the teams that have more premier talent and ones that have a really strong program, like France that we lost to, and Australia, and a few others. If we're just going to sit there and shoot threes, if those aren't going down, like Dame making 7 threes last night was the leading scorer at 21 points. But I think it would be foolhardy to rely solely on that. And there were numerous times where I don't know if it was just out of, I don't want to say laziness because we were up by so much, but it was just an easy shot and shot, and the defense wasn't fully coming out and extending out to the 3-point line. So you might as well take it because it is an open shot, and that is a good shot. I just fear that they would become reliant on it. There is an interesting article right now over on Bleacher Report talking about the fact that the FIBA ball is different from the NBA's ball, and that could be affecting how guys are shooting and why percentages seem to be kind of, down, but certain guys who are cash money at all times are struggling, uh, here and there. And I think you should give some credence to that. I mean, if you played enough basketball, you sit there before you start a game, and if 5 guys brought basketballs, you kind of check them all out to see which one consensus is that everybody likes. And I remember when Stern was still commissioner and they were phasing in those new basketballs, and to bring up Nash again, he was the most vocal opponent once we started getting into games, saying he didn't feel right in his hands and he didn't feel as though he could get proper grip on it. And he was constantly like trying to lick his fingers. He was always doing that. If you remember, just he flat out palm his tongue to get, some extra grip and tackiness on his fingers. But the players revolted so much against that new ball that they phased it out and they went back to the all leather. It was like a synthetic leather hybrid, if memory serves. And arguably it was just to get a more consistent ball night in, night out. If you use a synthetic, then you can, better stabilize the parameters that the ball is made with and acts on the court, as opposed to the leather comes down to the grade of the leather. And the leather, because it comes off of an animal, is going to be slightly different on every one of these balls. But the FIBA ball being different from the NBA should have a little bit of an effect. Now, will it long-term over the course of the tournament? I don't know. And could you also make that case for the other teams as well? Quite possibly. Or you could say that these guys have all been playing on, under 18 teams that eventually segue into their Olympic teams. So they're accustomed to playing with these FIBA balls, as opposed to us railroading in our stars for 2 weeks before and have asked them to play with a ball that they have, little to no experience with. I think it cuts a little bit both ways, but I do think that that's an interesting point from Bleacher Report, that we should take into account the fact that the basketball is different, and that makes a difference. Their opening lines of the article talk about, if a golfer used a different driver, would we not expect different outcomes? Or a baseball player has a different bat. And you're like, yeah, would you kind of read that? And given the fact that it's all based off of touch and feel on a basketball, and it doesn't feel the same, it would take a little bit of an adjustment to get used to how you might need to modestly alter your mechanics, not mechanics perhaps, but the touch and the feel, and to know when you're going to lace a shot and when you're not. But anyway, go check that out. It's an interesting article. All right, now to move on to the meat of today's discussion, which is NBA, the looming NBA free agency. It starts the 2nd, August 2nd, which is what, next Monday, which is a load of nonsense, because any agent and player in front office worth their salt has already, through back channels, figured out potentially who's going to go where and what kind of asking price that an individual wants, so on and so forth. Like a Kawhi, right? He's got a player option, which he will decline. And all indications are that he is going to go back to the Clippers, especially the fact that he had an ACL injury and he's going to be rehabbing all of next year. We'll see if he can make it back come playoff time. At this point, I'd be dubious as to that happening, because if Jamal Murray is looking to be out for all of next season, well, Kawhi's happened even later. So I think best case scenario is he's out 6 to 8 months, and worst case scenario he's out 10 to 12. Could be even longer on the worst case, but I'm saying the worst case of realistic expectations of what we've come to understand from ACL injuries, 10 to 12 months. Hopefully it doesn't end up like a Jaren Jackson Jr. situation with that MCL, and he was kept out like 2 times longer than the average individual. But Kawhi is more than likely intimated to the Clippers that I will re-sign with you, and they'll have the money set aside for him. I mean, what's interesting though is next year the salary cap is projected to be about 111 million, and the tax threshold is 136.6. And right now, the Clippers are at, with the cap hold of Kawhi, they're at 148. So they're 12 million over into the tax. And it'd also be repeater tax, which means they're going to be paying over the dollar for dollar amount. Now, if that's with the cap holds on player options of Kawhi and Serge Ibaka, Kawhi's is 36 million, Serge is 9.7. If Serge rescinds his, okay, well, that drops him down to 137-ish. And then they'd be down to 101 once Kawhi rescinds his. But Kawhi is going to re-sign, and it's probably going to be in the ballpark of starting at 40 mil, 42 mil, something along those lines. So they're right back into this same situation all over again, somewhere around 141 to 143. And they have coming up, if Serge opts out, then Serge gone. Then Patrick Patterson is up. Batum is up. Reggie Jackson is up. And DeMarcus, who got a little bit of run from them, is up. And they have partial guarantees on Terrence Mann, but they will be guaranteeing that for sure. And Yogi Ferrell and Aturu. But basically, like, they don't have much left in the war chest. And Reggie Jackson proved to be a pivotal guy for them. They need something at that point guard position. And he blossomed into an amazing player for them in the playoffs. Very consistent and a great addition to the team. So there are all kinds of teams, by the way, with this. When you start getting into it, I'll just rattle through a few of these. So the Lakers. Another one where it's just like, oh, they're in the mix. Will they get Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, or will they make a trade of, say, KCP? Well, actually, the floated has been Kyle Kuzma and Harold. You need Harold to opt in to go out and get Buddy Hield. Kuzma has been floated in all kinds of trades, and according to reports the end of last week or over the weekend, Kuzma and KCP everybody in the league has been contacted to see if they have any interest in Kuzma and KCP. And between those two, I mean, you're talking about 26 million. So you could send them out to get one all-star-ish level player. Somebody, that maybe has a couple all-stars under their belt, but they haven't re-signed at the peak money. I'm just not entirely sure, but to go out and get Buddy Hield. But anyway, so the Lakers, Schroeder is a free agent. Harrell, whether or not he opts in, he could be a free agent. Wes Matthews is a free agent. Alex Caruso is a free agent. Jared Dudley, no big loss. Markieff Morris, Talen Horton-Tucker, Andre Drummond, plus like Ben McLemore and a couple other guys. But they're already committed to 121 million. The Lakers are, unless you subtract Montrezl Harrell's 9.7, which gets him down to 112, which is still over the salary cap. Now they can overspend to retain their players. So if they want to get Dennis Schroeder, but Schroeder wants $100 million. So what he feels that he could get on the open market is $100 million over 4 years. And I now with the season under the belt, the Lakers now feel that Schroeder would be better served coming off the bench like he did in OKC instead of being a primary number one. And I agree with the supposed assessment of the Lakers on that. But they don't have really many avenues to add any of these guys. Like when people are floating Chris Paul, who's also another free agent, well, he's got a player option, which he will opt out of. How in the world can you afford him unless you get a sign and trade with CP? But then you have to do a salary match. So you'd need CP to take a tremendous amount of less money and then also convince the Suns that they need to make this trade. And then who are the Lakers sending back? It's also like the Kyle Lowry situation, who's a free agent. Lakers said they'd love to have Kyle Lowry, along with New Orleans, who made a big blockbuster trade to free up the cap space to go after somebody like Kyle Lowry or re-sign Lonzo Ball. But New Orleans is in the mix for him. Philly still has a tremendous amount of interest in Kyle Lowry. The Heat still have interest in Kyle Lowry. Like Kyle Lowry has a market out there. He wants 3 years, $90 million. He will get more than likely 3 years, $90 million. The Lakers cannot sign him because they're over the tax at 3 years, $90 million, unless they manage to ship out KCP, Kuzma, and Harold Declines. But then if they have Lowry at 30 millish, now you're talking about $106 million of their projected $111 million cap space. And they just don't have money left to go out and get anybody else. So I don't really foresee that being a viable option. But the Lakers are in another weird, kind of quandary. And we do this over and over and over again with all kinds of different guys. Where does CP go? I don't know. Kawhi seems like he's going to stay. And quite a few of these moves are kind of waiting for the domino of, is Lillard going to demand out? Is Beal going to demand out? Now, both of them, but especially I think within Beal's case, you need to let the front office know before tomorrow's draft. That way they can go out and get as many draft picks as they can and try and rebuild. And if Beal is gone, then Westbrook is more than likely gone as well. They'll find somebody for that contract. I don't know who. Westbrook is another potential Lakers individual, but once again, I'd like to see exactly how this gets done, given his cap hold. They would have to bundle together everything they have, do sign and trades on THT, and they'd have to put in KCP, they'd have to put in Kuzma. And if I'm, the Wizards, do I even want that? I don't know. But it doesn't look like Brad Beal is going to force his way out. Lillard is speculation is all over the map. Speculation is he wants out, and then Lillard claps back on Twitter. Speculation is that he's given his team a little bit of time. He wants to see what they do in free agency and the draft. And then Lillard claps back at that. Speculation is that Lillard is willing to take less money to go out and join a championship team. Lillard claps back at that. So it's hard to really parse out exactly what's going on there. But my guess is he stays for this season and Beal stays for this season. So the only really big marquee stars that look like they're probably on the move are Ben Simmons. But right now, Philly's asking price is through the effing moon, or through the roof to the moon. Supposedly they wanted from San Antonio 4 firsts and 3 pick swaps plus a young player. Are you crazy? Toronto supposedly shot down Van Vliet, Anunoby, someone else in a pick and said, no, thank you for Ben Simmons. And I actually agree with that one. Toronto has made Pascal Siakam available in potential trade discussions, and one of those in teams out there that are sniffing around are the Warriors. And I actually kind of like that for the Warriors, depending on what they have to get up exactly to get Pascal. But I think he would be a fantastic third option on this team. And if it's like, you know, Wiggins makes more than Siakam. So if it's Wiggins and a pick to go and get Siakam, I think Siakam better fits once Clay is back a need that they would have. Better than Wiggins does, because Wiggins then becomes somewhat redundant. But Pascal could be on the move. But, Simmons is going to determine quite a few different fates. But it'll be interesting. But anyway, back to CP. CP seems as though, unless he can get to a situation where he really wants to go, like the Knicks have been floated for a while. His former agent is the GM at the Knicks, Leon Rose. One of his primary goals over the past couple seasons has been to stay on the West Coast, to stay near his family who are based here in LA. And he achieved that goal in Phoenix and somewhat in Houston. Now, if you go all the way to the East Coast, I'm not entirely sure. He doesn't really make sense on the Lakers and the Clippers just because they don't have the money for him. If you stay and run it back with Phoenix, becomes somewhat a feel-good story. But do we feel like Phoenix is going to be back at this place next season? I'm not sure. They had some key injuries to other guys that opened up an avenue to making it to the finals. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't have made the finals regardless, but those injuries did make their road easier. It just did. There's no way to look at that any differently, in my opinion. But will they be at this level, next year? I don't know. It's super interesting. They could, but I think the West, with like a returning Warriors team at full health, and the Lakers potentially at full health, and the Clippers, depending on when Kawhi's timeline comes back, or if the Mavs manage to retool. The Pelicans opened up a bunch of space, and if they sign a Lowry or retain Lonzo, but now they don't have the looming cap holds of Adams and Bledsoe, and Valanciunas should fit pretty nicely alongside of Zion. He's not going to clog the lane like Steven Adams did. But, there's a team that didn't make it into the playoffs, and they can make it in. Will Minnesota have a resurgence? I'm not really buying it as of right now. If Dallas retools, San Antonio, these young guys coalesce and come together, and San Antonio, DeRozan is a free agent, Rudy Gay is a free agent, so they're freeing up those minutes and shots for younger guys. I don't think the Spurs are going to retain either of them unless they can get them for, a steal. But I think those guys want to. Seems as though DeRozan wants to move back to LA and play for one of the two teams here. Not sure how they afford him, but he would be a nice fit for the Lakers. But it doesn't really help with their three-point shooting, which they need help with. But anyway, so for Phoenix, if you hear Paul looking at this, be like, does this make sense? Will we be back in this situation? Will we be better? I don't know. It's a great question. Mike Conley is up for the Utah Jazz. Utah is cap hamstrung as well. If the projected cap is at 111 and the tax line is 136, they're at 134 right now next year. Now, they have a couple very small partial contracts, which would save them a scant amount of money if they opted not to retain those individuals. But between Gobert, Bogdanovich, Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, Derek Favors, Royce O'Neal, Donovan Mitchell, that's in essence $130-ish million right there, guaranteed for next season. So if they want to retain Conley at a price point that he's probably going to get somewhere in the mid 30s, the new ownership is going to have to stomach paying a hell of a tax bill. And I would guess Conley would want a 3-year to possibly 4-year deal. That's going to get pricey. It's going to get pricey. So Conley is on the market. There's going to be should be a decent amount of point guard movement overall. You got Lonzo out there. You've got CP. You got Lowry. You got Conley. You got Reggie Jackson and Campaign. The list goes on. There are other point guards out there. So if you're Utah, Conley was good. He wasn't great for you. So do you really want to go into the luxury tax over the next 2, possibly 3 seasons to retain this team? Is retaining Conley enough to get you over the hump? You were the team with the best record in the regular season, and perhaps you could look at the Bucks and say, you know what? They did this and stumbled and eventually won a championship. Perhaps we can do the same. And just need to keep plugging away and make minor tweaks, upgrade the roster ever so slightly. Now, they don't have anyone near as dominant as Giannis, but they could look to that and say, it's still possible. We can still win a championship. And Milwaukee's another one that they benefited from injuries as well. And in no way am I saying put an asterisk next to the championship, because every season has hit its fair share of injuries that everybody wants to point to and say, well, that's the reason that so-and-so got past, X got past Y. Otherwise, Y would have won. It's like, could be the case, but, Team Y was hurt, and that's part of the game. So suck it up, Buttercup. You didn't win it. So what did the Utah Jazz do? I guess we'll find out on the second. But what's going to be amazing is whenever it is, it's midnight on the 2nd East Coast time is, I believe, when free agency technically starts, and there's just going to be a flurry of deals that are already done. I love that every year. 12:01. Oh, we've got the complete construct of a highly complicated 4-year deal worked out, and it's got incentives built into it, like which pushed the Bucks into the luxury tax for the championship this year because they won the championship. It triggered a bonus in his contract. But at 12:01, all these guys are going to have very complex contracts seemingly done in 60 seconds, which is utter bullshit. But whatever. Who cares? Teams have broken the rules, but everybody breaks the rules, so no one really cares. The Hawks have an interesting discussion with themselves about John Collins, because I think they need to retain John Collins. But his cap hold could be pretty high, depending. And thankfully though, for the Hawks, they're 18 million, or 17 and change underneath the salary cap, and they're nowhere near the tax threshold. They're 40 some odd $40 million below the tax threshold. But they also have Collins. They've got Lou Will coming up. And then, Solomon Hill played some decent minutes for him. Tony Snow, not really. But basically Lou Will and John Collins. Sorry, I blanked there for a second. And they've got Chris Dunn, who's got a player option for $5 million. Whether or not he exercises that, I kind of feel like Chris Dunn should exercise that $5 million. I'm not sure what team out there is going to pay him more than $5 million, and give him like 3 years at that. So you might as well take the $5 million and then potentially play well enough this year to hopefully get someone to give you a 2 to 3 year contract after that one, because I don't know many teams lining up to give him anything other than the mid-level exception max. And even then, Dunn is one of those guys that he's more than likely going to be out of the league very soon. Anyway, moving on. So Collins should be super interesting. I think the Hawks will do what they can to resign him unless somebody comes in with just a crazy offer. And they'd be remiss. But I mean, they have a wealth of depth, the Hawks do. And, late in the playoffs, they got, Cam Reddish back, and he was huge for them. They also, DeAndre Hunter being out hurt, perhaps they can suffer the loss of John Collins. Or if they re-sign John Collins, they might be able to package a couple of those younger guys like a DeAndre Hunter and get something in return for him and free up the cap space. But I would imagine the Hawks will pay John Collins. And good for John Collins. He bet on himself. He didn't take the extension that they offered him. And now he's going to make more money. And I'm always a fan of when players do that. So let's see. Lowry and DeRozan we brought up. Who else is out there that's marquee? Lonzo. Several teams are in the mix for Lonzo. My Bulls being one of them. I actually, now that he's got a 3-point shot that's pretty damn consistent, I would take Lonzo on our team. He's a good defender. He passes the ball really well. He's got great court awareness, and he can shoot from outside. The mechanics of his shot have improved every season, and he no longer does that little bring it up from the hip, little wind up thing, and the hitch in his shot, that weird release and all that. He has worked hard to correct those things, and he's turned himself into a quality 3-point shooter. But I know other teams are going to be interested as well. New Orleans wants to re-sign him. The Knicks are going to be in the mix. And depending on his price point, there's probably going to be a couple others. The Lakers have been, the Lakers get floated in everything because they're the Lakers. And I also think now in this Twitter age, it's also because their fans can at times be so delusional that they're in the mix for every potential guy out there. But getting him back to the Lakers on some sort of like sign and trade, be interesting. Then New Orleans has even more of the Lakers' assets. But if I'm New Orleans, Kyle Lowry would be a good addition for them. But Lonzo is on roughly the same timeline as Zion, and they seem to have a good mind meld at times, knowing where the other likes to get the ball, where they need to be on the court to be the most advantageous, to maximize what the other player could potentially do. But Lonzo could very well be on the move. And I'll be interested. Right now, like, it's a lot of smokescreen nonsense from all these guys and everybody else on these lists. But I think the Pelicans would be wise to hold on to him as best they can. All right. So moving on. Who else we got? We've got Portland's got a few different guys coming up. So Dame wants to do the wait and see approach, but you've got Norman Powell, who opted out of his player option of $11.6 million. So he's going to be a free agent. Nurkic only has a partially guaranteed contract this year, but if Lillard stays, then I'm guessing that goes to fully guaranteed. But then they also have Zach Collins, Enes Kanter, Carmelo Anthony, and Harry Giles, I guess, coming up as free agents. And so with Powell declining his player option, they're at $120 million on their salary cap. So they can overpay to re-sign their guys, and then they still have their mid-level exception and whatnot. But they really can't go out and do much in free agency unless they finally package CJ McCollum up to go and get something else to try and build around Dame. But I think even though Dame just signed that mega extension, which by the end of it, he'll be making $54.25 million the 24-25 season, he is potentially going to force his way out of a team. And the irony of ironies is, he's been saying for years he'll never ring chase. He's not going to join some super team. He wants to build this in Portland. And it's just gotten to the point where Portland doesn't have enough, and they have so much money tied into guys. The team is going to be roughly the same, and it's not going to make much of a difference as their overall standing within the West. As they're currently constructed, I don't see how Portland does this. But when you've got so many guys coming up from being under contract, you got to make choices here. I think on some level, depending on the price, tag on Norman Powell, you kind of need to re-sign him. At the very least, you don't want to lose the asset because you're so cap hamstrung. You don't have any other options other than re-sign him and then try and trade him. Although then at that point, I think the rules kick in that you'd have to wait until December at some point before you can trade the players that you signed in the offseason. Something along those lines. But Portland's got a whole bunch of interesting questions. And then one team with boatloads of questions are the Miami Heat. Miami Heat have a slim roster next year, to say the very least. So, under contract fully, without any kind of player options, they have Jimmy Butler for $36 million, Bam Adebayo for $28 million, Tyler Hero for $4 million, Precious for 2.7, and then 2 into the bench guys. That's it. Full unrestricted free agents. They have Victor Oladipo, Trevor Ariza, Bielitsa, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson, and Udonis Haslem, Dwayne Dedmon. Player options, Goran Dragic at 19.4 and Iggy at 15. Pretty sure Iggy's going to opt in on that, if I just had to guess. No one's going to pay him $15 million to play unless he retires. Pretty sure Iggy is opting into that $15 million. And then Goran. I'm sorry, both of those are team options on the Goran and Andre Iguodala. So if I'm the Heat, I either try and find a trade partner for Iguodala or I rescind that option. And for Dragic, so if they rescind the Iguodala, that drops them down to $98 million. And they could retain Goran at that 19, and then they have $13 million under the cap. So they could go out and sign guys and go into the salary tax. They could do it. But do you want to overpay for Oladipo? Is Oladipo going to be like on a 1-and-1 contract to prove that he's still good? And the second year is a player option, and then he can opt out. So you get him at a discount this year. If he's at 21 million this past season, maybe next season he's willing to take like 15 or something. And just give us a 1-and-1. We'll give you a $30 million contract. Year 2 is a player option. And prove your worth to the league. Duncan Robinson, I think you got to try and retain. But if somebody swoops in and just grandfathers him a massive or godfathers him rather, a massive contract, what do you do? The dude that you picked up off the scrap heap. Him and Nunn. And now both of these guys could be walking and making the money that they rightly deserve. Trevor Ariza, Bielitsa, that's fine. Dwayne Dedmon, that's fine. Haslem, that's fine. Haslem has had a long and fruitful career. So the Heat have so many roster spots to fill. They have some cap to play with. They don't have a ton of cap to play with. So Octane said some stuff in the chat earlier as pertaining to the new rule changes. So that was really early on. But then Daniel Saville just put in, if Dame leaves, I wouldn't blame him. He's given everything to Portland and he's 31 this year. I agree. I just don't know what exactly or where exactly, because whoever trades for him needs to be kind of in championship mode now and also have the pick assets to send back. And it's a finite pool of teams that could do it, because you have to look at it like he is under contract. So you're trading for a guy that you would have under contract for another 4 years. Now, it's at a staggeringly high price, but you would have him under contract for the next 4 years. So anyway, the Heat have questions for days. But you can do this with like a lot of teams. What is Dallas going to do? I don't know. I don't think they can find a dance partner for KP unless they're willing to take the short end of the stick on that one and move him out. But I think that marriage clearly needs a divorce. Those two do not get along. And with Hardaway Jr. being a free agent, they need to retain him. Now they can let Josh Richardson go. Sucks you lost that trade with the Steph Curry, and the Sixers won that trade, but you need to cut your losses. The sunk fallacy. You don't want that to bite you in the ass, where you just keep putting good money into bad over and over and over again, and put your team in a situation where you're fully hamstrung and you're tied into a squad that has no real championship aspirations when you have a generational talent like Luka. But Dallas has questions. There's quite a few teams going down the list of, given the free agents that you're giving up and the available market out there, I'm not entirely sure what you can do to retool all these guys. So it'll be interesting. But the free agent, the looming, I can't wait for August 2nd. There's just going to be this floodgate that opens, and we'll see where all this goes. But once again, if there's going to be a massive trade, then it's going to come, or if somebody's going to want out, it's going to come in the next 24 hours, because teams need to know before the draft. So, considering there have been no rumblings as of late from the Beal camp, pretty sure Beal's going to stay at this point. Lillard looks like he's going to stay. Ben Simmons seems to be the only one that's going to be on the move. Whether or not they manage to pull the trigger before tomorrow night for that, who knows? We shall see, but I don't think you'll see Ben Simmons in a 76ers uniform. I think that's going to be the only really huge title shift free agent type of guy, unless CP does. CP and Lowry, I think, are the two biggest somewhat question marks, but Kawhi seems like he's staying, and all the others aren't as huge. I mean, had Giannis been in this draft class like he was going to be, had he not signed that extension, all these teams that have been gearing up for it, primarily, someone like Miami Heat, trying to convince him to come down there. But a lot of teams have been setting themselves up for having a wealth of cash this year, assuming that Giannis and Kawhi, before Paul George signed his extension, and then you add in the CPs, the Kyle Lowrys, the so on and so forth down the line. It's like, there's a lot of marquees gone. But with Giannis resigning, Paul George signing his extension, Kawhi hurting himself, and more than likely going to sign with the Clippers, this draft class got, this free agency class got a lot less interesting. But I will be glued to my phone starting Sunday night to see all the action as it transpires. And I'm sure you will be as well. So that is it for today's Drop in Dimes. Enjoy free agency. Enjoy the draft tomorrow night. I wish I had something for you there, but I don't follow any of those guys. So my opinion is useless when it comes to evaluating these young kids. Until they play in the league, I really don't know who they are, and I don't know what they offer. I don't know. There's just not enough hours in the day to watch as much NBA as I do, then to turn around and watch as much college plus G League plus international. I mean, 2 of the top 8 guys are coming from the G League team, the Ignite. And all 5 of their primary starters, I believe, are all future draft prospects that joined this team in the hopes of being drafted in the lottery. And they got 2 out of the 5. That is not bad. But I don't watch G League games and I don't watch college and all that. So my opinion is based on whenever they come in and I finally see them. Which usually would have been at the Summer League. But now Summer League's gotten so bananas that I don't even know if I want to go anymore. It used to be back in the day, you just walk between the 2 gyms, sit wherever you wanted to because nobody was there. And you'd easily see 5 games in a day. And you're not going to see the complete games because you need to hop back and forth between the 2 a little bit. But you're going to watch 5 games and be able to see a ton of different, prospects. And now it's just you got to sit and you got to line up early and you miss out on other things. It's just, I don't know. It's not as fun as it once was for me. But I will look forward to seeing those guys in the league in this upcoming season. Let's see if these top 3 guys, it used to be the top 5. Everybody's like top 5. These are all amazing players. And now it's winnowed down to the top 3 all have a chance to be number 1, true number 1s. And then 4 and 5, the jury is out as to how exactly good they're going to be. But by all accounts, 1, 2, and 3. And then I see people even limit that to 1 and 2 for sure. 3 has an excellent chance of being this. So welcome to the draft. This is why I don't have an opinion. I couldn't tell you who has a chance of being a perennial all-star and who doesn't. Don't have the slightest clue. So why am I chiming in with my opinion? Doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, that is it for Dropping Dimes today. Thank you to everybody for joining me. I'm sure next week I'll do a post-free agency wrap-up. Maybe do a grading, who I liked, what they've done so far, and who I don't. It will only be about 36 hours into it, but all the major names at that point will have moved, and then we'll have the secondary players. After the dominoes fall from there, then you go out and all the other names that are out there and see how these teams kind of retool. But there it is. You can follow me anywhere at Matt Knost, MATTKNOST. If you want to watch along live, like we had some people today, you can go to youtube.com/Matt Knost. And that is it. I'll see you guys next week. Stay safe out there. Please get vaccinated and wear your masks. I'll see you guys next week. Adios.